What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I am here today. It is Saturday, obviously, so day prior to the game. Tomorrow, we play the New York Jets. Is their stadium still MetLife? Yeah, it is, right? So we're gonna play the New York Jets tomorrow. It's up in New York. We actually have back-to-back games because we're gonna go play the Jets this week and then the Giants the following week. And then we have the Bengals and then the Patriots to end out the year. The Patriots game, even with backups, even if they play backups, I'm pretty sure we're going to end up losing that game, especially since it's in Foxborough. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Before I actually get to, the injury report and all that stuff, there was an article out today that I wanted to go through real quick and read a little bit. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but because it was, the article was basically biggest surprises from around the league. There was 9 of them. I'm going to read 3 of them because I thought this was really interesting. Number 7 out of 9 was the Steelers winning without Big Ben. Okay. When quarterback Ben Roethlisberger landed on injured reserve after just 2 games, it was easy to write off the Pittsburgh Steelers. They got blown out by the New England Patriots in Week 1 and fell to 0-3 2 weeks later. And that's part of why everybody was like, oh, the Dolphins pick from the Steelers is going to be a guaranteed top 5. Well, how's that working out? Because it's now at 22nd as it stands today. Then something surprising happened. The Steelers swung a trade for Miami Dolphins safety Minkah Fitzpatrick. Their defense solidified and they started winning games. It hasn't always been pretty, and Pittsburgh recently switched from Mason Rudolph to Devlin Hodges at quarterback, but the defense has carried the team to a 7-5 record. The unit ranks 6th in scoring defense, 18.8 points allowed per game, and 5th in total defense, 317.2 allowed yards per game. The Steelers are in possession of the AFC's number 6 seed. As long as they can get consistent quarterback play, they're in a good position to make the postseason and may make some noise depending on the matchups. 4 of their losses have come to 10-win teams: the Patriots, Ravens, Seattle Seahawks, and San Francisco 49ers. Also, real quick, just to note, we picked up a cornerback, I think it was, from the Seattle practice squad, Lyndon Stevens, just to let you guys know about that. And excluding the New England game, those defeats were by a combined 9 points. And they lost to the 49ers as well, if I didn't say that. This has been one of the most surprising runs of the 2019 season. So I read that why, because it looks like the Dolphins are massively losing that trade. And in a number of ways, right? They lost a for sure, player to be a cornerstone of their defense. The Steelers are winning now, and the pick is 22nd, so on, so on, so forth, right? Next, Ryan Tannehill saving the Titans season. Like the Steelers, the Tennessee Titans got off to a rough start, but are on the cusp of making the postseason. They've gone from 2-4 to 7-5 thanks to quarterback Ryan Tannehill, one of the unlikeliest heroes of 2019. Now, real quick, I'm going to pause there because why is he one of the unlikeliest heroes? Because he's been shit on for so long for absolutely no reason. Despite his records, despite his constant improvement, despite he's shown, good leadership, despite the fact that he's been an Iron Man almost his entire career. He's got the toughness and fortitude. He's got the skill set, blah, 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 blah. He's got the production. So despite all of that, he's still one of the most shit on quarterbacks for absolutely no reason. So that's why he's the unlikeliest hero. Not because he isn't good, but because everybody has, or most people have this, they just have this negative, connotation when they apply or when they talk about Ryan Tannehill, and they shit on him, right? Anyway, the team acquired the 2012 first-round pick from the Dolphins in March, and he spent the first 6 weeks of the regular season backing up Marcus Mariota. Tennessee has gone 5-1 since switching to Tannehill in Week 7. The 31-year-old quarterback has passed for 1,602 yards with 12 touchdowns and 4 interceptions with a 113.9 rating, and teammates are buying into what he brings to the field. The ball is coming out of his hands smooth, and he's making good decisions, wide receiver Adam Humphries per The Athletic's John Glennon. There's not much indecision. He's confident when he's choosing to throw the ball. As a receiver, you like that and you're prepared to go make a play for him. As far as redemption stories go, Tannehill's seemed like one of the least likely. Again, but that's just because of the bias that people have. If you looked at him objectively, you would realize that it's not unlikely at all. And someone like me knew that he was going to usurp Marcus Mariota because he's the better quarterback. Why do I read that though? I read that in part because this entire teardown that we've had, and the last one on this list is Miami's competitive streak. We'll get to that in a second. And that is in large part because as the season has gone on, we've played weaker and weaker and weaker opponents overall. Also because these players are playing super fucking hard, man. Super hard. But why? Again, it's not the coaching staff. I believe that Ryan Fitzpatrick does have a lot to do with it. He has gotten a lot of these young players to like buy into him in some of the similar ways that Ryan Tannehill's gotten the players there to buy into him. And because they're fighting for their jobs and their careers and their dreams, man, and their families, right? All of that stuff. And again, considering the fact that there are so many undrafted free agents and waiver wire guys, they're just happy for the opportunity, right? So that other stuff doesn't really matter to them. They're just happy to be in the league, even if it happens to be on the shit, like one of the worst teams in the league that has adopted, the worst philosophy that you could possibly adopt for an NFL franchise. But so we didn't need to do all this. Ryan Tannehill's killing it. Frank Gore is continuing to set records for the Bills, and they're looking to go to the postseason. Minkah Fitzpatrick is in running for Defensive Player of the Year and has single-handedly elevated that team to 7-5. I mean, at least according to this article, right? And so, and they're looking to push for the playoffs and make it into the playoffs. Let's see. Robert Quinn is almost to 10 sacks on the season for the Cowboys. Kiko Alonso has been hurt the past couple games, but has been having solid production for them. Let's see. Who else? Laramie Tunsil and Kenny Stills doing wonderful things for the Texans. And obviously, we expect them to make the playoffs. I mean, you can go on and on and on. Kenyon Drake is doing wonderful things for the Cardinals, even though, they're struggling as a team overall, right? But he's elevated to the top back. I mean, you can just go down the list. And then all of, people are looking like this. People are looking at, the Dolphins poaching players from other teams and stuff as if it's a good thing. No, dude, it's not a good thing. Why? For a couple reasons. One, because it's constant roster turnover. It hasn't stopped, right? But that also goes to show you that their evaluation is shit. They can't evaluate to save their fucking lives, okay? So they're just constantly dumping off the players. The list of players that they've dumped off is growing and growing and growing and growing, right? But the list of players that they've kept or that are potential building blocks for next year is shorter and shorter. And not only that, but it's, filled with players that are at best average. So, I mean, anyway, again, you guys can figure out how you feel about that on your own, right? I just like to give the facts and the best analysis that I can based off of my perspective of those facts. So let's read the last one. Miami's competitive streak. It seemed as though the Dolphins' plan was to tank for the 2020 draft. They traded away left tackle Laramie Tunsil and wide receiver Kenny Stills. A few weeks later, they dealt star safety Minkah Fitzpatrick. They lost their first 4 games by a combined score of 26-163. They gave up on the second-year quarterback Josh Rosen after just 3 starts. Miami appeared to be in store for a historically bad season and a death grip on the first overall pick. Here's the thing though, head coach Brian Flores and his players apparently weren't interested in facilitating the tank job. Pause there, because that's factually just incorrect. The players, absolutely. There's absolutely no evidence or indication to say that the players are not. And in fact, there is a ton of information and stuff that you could use to say that the players are, right? Now, again, I think it's far more to do with their contracts and so on, and their careers and so on and so forth, than it is this coaching staff. But with Flores, the very first thing that you can say about Flores is he took the job. He took the job because it's undeniable. Almost nobody will, deny that Stephen Ross put the directive down. So first of all, the first hit against him is that he took the job. I also take the Kenny Stills situation as a major hit, and the fact that he lied to Laramie Tunsil and said he wasn't going to be traded. But he recently came out and admit that he had a lot of say in the roster moves and how this roster was built and designed. He said it. He said he's been in the waiver wire and blah, blah, blah. And he's had to do with a lot of these transactions that have happened over the course of the season and the preseason. Okay? So he admit to being part of the destruction of this roster. So that's another hit on him. Plus, last game was the first game that you could say, objectively say, and I did, that there was more good things from the coaching staff than bad. There were still some bad. Again, I did not like at all the onside kick attempt coming out of into the second half. And I thought some of those plays, even though they were successful, were still a bit too risky for my liking. And so, but we've seen, we've seen though in other games, those risks have been massive failures, right? So the vast majority of his aggressive decisioning throughout the season have been massive, massive failures, and in fact have caused us to lose games. So in that regard, as far as I'm concerned, he's 100% on board with the tank because why? He accepted it from philosophy standpoint. He helped to design the team to be as low talented, etc. as possible, and his on the field decisions have backed that up as well. So Brian Flores, in my mind, is unquestionably part of the tank. Okay, they're lucking out in a way, right? Because they said publicly that they're trying to win. They're lucking out because they have been able, because the team that they have, the players are so desperate to make sure that they put out good film and so on and so forth to help, their careers, make sure that they have a paycheck. I mean, any of these guys, Ken Crawley just got cut for being injured. So any of these guys could get injured or not quite play up to how they want to and be cut immediately and just not even have a job. Okay, and then there goes their paycheck altogether. So these players are playing for their livelihoods, their dignity, and their, all of that shit, right? Not for this coaching staff and for this organization. I don't believe that at all, okay? But then they were also able to overcome, bad teams. Again, our schedule has gotten weaker and weaker throughout the season. Again, we play the Jets this week, the Giants next week, the Bengals after that, and then finally we end the season with the Patriots. But we started the season with Patriots, Ravens, Chargers, Cowboys, and especially at the beginning of the year, all of those teams were hot playoff contenders from last year, potential playoff contenders from this year. The Cowboys, to be fair, have fallen off. The Chargers are kind of whatever, right? But certainly at the beginning of the year, and the defending Super Bowl champions, so on and so forth. So, but clearly our schedule has gotten weaker and weaker. And for example, in the previous game against the Jets, it was a tough team, right? The players themselves are tough. It's not due to the coaching staff. I will not give them credit for that. Because it's the motive. Why are they tough? And they're not particularly physical, so they're not tough in that way. They're tough mentally only because of the fact that I believe that they're playing for their careers. Anyway, so there's a lot of additional context that is very important in that. So it's absolutely ridiculous to say that Brian Flores is not part of the tank. In fact, that there is an abundance of information to say that Brian Flores is absolutely 100% on board with this tank. Now, of course, let's see how things go, forward. But they are also, let's note though, they are because of all of the draft capital that they have, they can kind of have their cake and eat it too, right? Because they can absolutely trade up in the draft, right? If we do manage to beat the Jets, manage to beat the Giants, the Bengals, I think it's almost assuredly we're going to lose to the Patriots in Foxborough. So that'll be our 10th loss, almost guaranteed, even if they play backups. So we could have, 6 wins, right? We could end up at 6 wins. We could end up 6-10, which would certainly be, you know, a surprise and an exceeding of expectations going into this year, especially with everything that happened. But it's not on the coaching staff. They did everything they possibly could. Now, again, we can go into these games going forward and see how things play out. Now, they also lucked out because they don't have Kalen Ballage anymore. He's on injured reserve because he got hurt, right? So they lucked out in that regard that they're not going to have that blatant and obvious fucking, you know, coaching decision that puts this team in bad position to lose. He's ending the season as the worst running back, like, ever, right? So, but they lucked out because, you know, now they're going to have to use Gaskin and Laird, and they're just more productive. So, but we'll see. I mean, I find it pretty inconceivable that the Dolphins are going to score 37 points again or exceed that number. I honestly think that this game is probably going to end up being a bit more low scoring. But we'll get to that in a minute. So let me just finish this. They've clawed their way to a 3-9 record with 3 wins in their last 5 games and will likely draft after number 1. First, okay, let me pause again really quick. Again, that's all the players, and I was going to say that, but if we end up winning those games and get to 6-10, we could very likely drop out of the top 10 even, or at least at the very back end of the top 10. And then if the Steelers and you know, the Texans continue down the path that they're going, those picks are going to be in the early to mid 20s. There's absolutely nothing to say, going back to the cake and eating it too, right? This power structure from Stephen Ross to the front office to Brian Flores and the coaching staff have done everything in their ability, right? So at this point, even if they manage to squeak out those wins, they can take all of that draft capital and fucking trade it away so they can move up. Now, again, they can prove me wrong on this, and we still do have to wait to see what happens in these next few games, but it's also going to be very important to see what the coaching staff does. Do they continue making bad decisions with, you know, timeouts and challenges? Again, to be fair, they were better in this last game, but overwhelmingly it's been bad. Are they going to make curious personnel decisions? Are they going to make curious play calls, right? So all of that is important. But even if they manage to win the rest of the, you know, 3 of these last 4 games, okay, they're going to get undue credit because they did absolutely everything in their power. But it's just going to so happen that they did, along the way, they stripped this team and got rid of all the building blocks so much that they do have enough that they could trade up to go get a quarterback. And that would be the worst thing that they could absolutely do. But again, to be fair, we still need to wait and see how it goes. So, the 1-11 Cincinnati Bengals have the lead for that pick and will play Miami in Week 16. The Dolphins still aren't a good team, but they've at least been fun to watch over the last month plus. Journeyman, I will agree with that. For the most part. Because most of these games still have been, you know, not super entertaining, but we have gotten some wins, and last game for sure was the most entertaining, the most riveting without question. Journeyman quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick is playing steady ball, and wide receiver Devontae Parker finally seems to be reaching his potential. I do agree with that last part of Devontae Parker, finally, but it's, again, not credit to this coaching staff anywhere near as much as it is to the fact that he's finally healthy, which actually goes to the Adam Gase regime because they were the ones that got him finally in the right mindset, you know, practicing right, eating right, sleeping right, all that. We know for a fact he made those changes during the Adam Gase era. And that is the reason why he is finally healthy and on the field. It's never been his, you know, production when healthy or his ability or the flashes. It's never been that. But he's also never consistently dominated, and so we need to see if he can do that. Now, the coaching staff can get a little bit of credit to helping further develop him as a player now that he is healthy, but the biggest problem for him was his health, and that was solved by the Gase regime. Fitzpatrick is playing steady ball. I think that it's unlikely that he's going to have... Look, I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick is up and down, and he is taking a beating. He is still on the injury report with a shoulder and a forearm, and he is getting beat up every game. So, you know, it's pretty amazing that it's lasted this long. But, like, let's say with the Tampa Bay Bucks, I think it was last year, he had a good, like, 3 or 4 game stretch before getting benched for Jameis Winston. Now, is he going to end up getting benched for Josh Rosen? I don't know. Potentially, maybe it could still happen. We'll have to wait and see. But he could still, if it does, it's likely because he gets injured. So, and the Jets have a pretty damn good defense, even though they are massively banged up and I believe are going to be without Jamal Adams. Anyway, as the Philadelphia Eagles found out in Week 13, the Dolphins aren't going to be an easy out down the stretch. This statement would have sounded ludicrous a month into the season. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think it's just, at this point, kind of a luck of the draw. Anyway, now I spent 20 minutes on that, so there was some really good things that I really wanted to talk about. So I got that out of the way. Now let me get into this actual game. So before I get into that, let me talk about the injury report. The Dolphins will have every player on their active roster available against the New York Jets on Sunday. When the team released its final injury report of the week Friday, it did not include a single player listed as questionable, doubtful, or out. Wow, that means everybody is healthy enough to play. Every player on the active roster was full participant in practice Friday, except for wide receiver Allen Hurns, who was limited with an ankle injury. Let's just pause for a quick second. Okay, I'm so tired of how people frame things, right? People frame things in such a way that leaves out massively important context and so on and so forth. So why is that? Yes, our injury report has shrunk, but there were still like 8 players or whatever on the injury report. Okay, they didn't get game status designations, but they are still playing through injuries. Okay, so there's still like 8 dudes on the injury report that are injured. And they're playing through injuries. And we've seen more and more injuries every game. So, okay, that's the first thing. Secondly, it shrunk because we put a ton of guys on injured reserve. Our injured reserve list is now longer than our fucking injury report. Okay? And we've also cut guys like Ken Crawley, who I mentioned earlier, who were injured. So, like, it's absolutely ridiculous to put it into this light like, oh man, this is such a wonderful thing and the Dolphins are so healthy. It's a yes and no thing. It's nuanced and there's a lot more context that goes into it. And also, what's this fucking bullshit like it's some massive achievement? No, people are like, oh, they're super healthy at this point of the year. Again, that's because, I mean, if they didn't put like a bunch of these guys on injured reserve, then our injury report would be like 50 players long. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, the other players on the injury report during the week were linebacker Jerome Baker, who's been getting more and more hurt. Like the past couple games, he's come out with injuries. Tackle Julian Davenport, quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, cornerback Nick Needham, safety Stephen Parker, and cornerback Ken Webster. So those are all actually really troubling names. Allen Hurns, Fitzpatrick, Needham, Stephen Parker, Jerome Baker, Julian Davenport, Ken Webster. Those are all like starters on the field. So if any of those guys get hurt and have to come out, then that, you know, drastically hurts the team on the field that day, right? If Ryan Fitzpatrick comes out because he gets hurt, Josh Rosen goes in. Nick Needham gets hurt. Jerome Baker gets hurt. Julian Davenport, I mean, he sucks anyway, but Ken Webster, right? So the framing is ridiculous on the injury situation. By comparison, the Jets are 13 players on their final injury report, though cornerback Brian Poole was the only one who was ruled out. That all of that is true. The Jets, but just like last time, massively injured. They're not a great team, right? They're kind of a bad team overall and massively injured. And last game, they unquestionably got victimized by terrible officiating. And then, a pride strong team, the players, overcame those things. So we'll see how this goes. I mean, this game is in MetLife Stadium. It's a home game for them. They just had a terrible game against the Cincinnati Bengals to give them their first win of the season. After having, a hot 3-game stretch. So they're going to be wanting to bounce back. It's, of course, against the Dolphins. So, there's going to be that rivalry. Plus, we beat them before. So Gase is going to want to come out and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of stuff that, hypes up the Jets in this one. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, right? Also, Le'Veon Bell is going to be out. But that's with an illness. It's not necessarily because of an injury. But he should be out. The list of players listed as doubtful was headed by Pro Bowl safety Jamal Adams. We'll have to see if he plays or not. And included tackle Chuma Odoga with a knee, safety Mathis Farley with a rib and ankle, cornerback Arthur Mollett with a calf. None of the 4 practiced Friday. So it's likely all 4 of those players will end up out. That's almost all of their inactives at that point. If those 4 players plus Le'Veon Bell plus Brian Poole are out, that's 6 of their 7. So we'll see what they're in, who does not play for them. 8 players were listed as questionable, including starting running back Le'Veon Bell with an illness who we do know now is going to be out. There were reports. The others were defensive line Henry Anderson with a shoulder, tackle Kelvin Beachum with ankles, multiple, cornerback Maurice Canaday with an illness quad, tight end Ryan Griffin, illness. Damn, their whole team is getting sick. Defensive line Steve McClendon with a knee hip, wide receiver Demarius Thomas with a hamstring, and linebacker Paul Warlow with a quad. A bunch of big names for them. Bell did not practice Friday, while the other 7 were limited to practice. So that is the injury report. It is absolute. So that's a major factor in this game. They are massively injured. We'll see, right? How that affects things. All right, let's get into the stats, the league standings, so on and so forth, and then I'll give, my analysis, the 4 things that I look for, in each of these games, and, give a little bit of a prediction how I think the game is going to go. So the Dolphins are now 3-9 after their win against the Eagles. The Jets are now 4-8 after their loss to the Bengals. Now again, of course, if we do win this game, that's going to be huge and drop us. For one, the Jets could overtake us. They could be one of the teams ahead of us in the draft order, and it would certainly push us out of the top 5. We'll see how far down it would drop us. I'm almost certain it would drop us out of the top 5 because I think it would we're currently at number 4. I think it would probably drop us more than 2 spots, or at least 2 spots. I don't know. We'll have to see. I haven't done the calculations. I probably could because there are like websites and stuff that do that, but I haven't, so I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But if we win this game, then that massively affects the draft order, right? And certainly would push the Jets ahead of us. Okay, because then we would both be 4-9, and we would certainly have the tiebreaker over the Jets having beat them twice. So league standings, the Dolphins are 16.7 points per game. We have now scored 200 points even on the season after our 37 points last week. That's obviously our average per game obviously went up. There was an increase. We also, our league standing went from 30th to 29th. So the Jets are scoring 17 points per game, which is 28th in the league. So obviously just ahead of us. Yards per game, we did have an increase in our average per game. We are now at 276.9, but we stayed at 30th in the league. The Jets are 262.8, which is 31st, so obviously right behind us. Pass yards, we did have an increase in average at 214.2, and an increase in our position overall. We are now 24th. The Jets are 190.2 per game, which is 30th in the league. Rush yards, we went down. Our average went down just a little bit to 62.8 per game, rush yards per game. And we stayed even, though, at 32nd in the league. The Jets are 72.6, which is 31st. So, obviously, their offense hasn't been very good. Everybody's blaming Gase. I don't think that he deserves as much fault for that as they're giving him. I think we have to wait and see. Like, a lot of people are like, why aren't you using Le'Veon Bell and blah, blah, blah. Look, he didn't want Le'Veon Bell. I don't know if that's part of it, but he didn't want Le'Veon Bell. He didn't want CJ Mosley. He didn't want those big name free agents. Anyway, so point is though, is their offense, it's a fact that their offense is obviously not very good. So there are going to be some opportunities there. However, our defense is pretty shit, and you know, they're just super banged up. So we'll see how that goes. It'll be an interesting matchup to see how the Jets offense is able to do against our defense. And then, so defensively, and then, you know, we'll see, it'll also, you know, be interesting to see on the flip side, you know, is our offense going to be able to, you know, I mean, like I said, I don't think they're going to score 37 points. I actually think this game is probably going to be pretty low scoring overall, but, you know, can they break 20, right? Can they increase their points per game average, again, right? Because they actually have been doing that overall for the past few games. So are they able to do that again, or do they score, you know, about 16 points or maybe only 2 touchdowns? We'll see, right? But so defensively, points allowed per game, we dropped just slightly. There was a slight decrease. We're literally right now at 31.4 points per game, but we went down from 31.5 going into last week. So obviously 0.1 difference, not much, but we are slightly down, a slight decrease there, still giving up over 30 points per game. We have now given up 377 total on the season, and that stays even at 32nd overall in the league. The Jets are giving up 23.3. Their defense certainly is their strong suit. Points allowed 23.3, which is 19th. Yards allowed for us, we had a slight decrease down from like 403 or whatever it was to 399.7 yards per game, which actually is technically a good thing, because we gave our average per game went down slightly, but just barely, and we're still 30th overall in the league. The Jets, on the other hand, are 317.4 in the league, which is 6th overall. Pass yards allowed, we had an increase in our average to 256.2, but a decrease in league standings from 22nd to 23rd in pass yardage. The Jets are giving up 242.2, which is 19th in the league. And rush yardage, we had a slight decrease in our overall average per game down to 143.5, but we stayed at 31st overall in the league in rush yards allowed per game. Yeah, and rush yards in the league, right? So we're 31st. The Jets, on the other hand, are giving up 75.2 per game, which is first. The Jets have the #1 ranked rushing defense. Even this late in the game, this late in the season, with as many injuries as they have. So, and our run game is shit. So, you know, we'll see how that goes. Is our running game going to be able to do anything? Probably not. It's probably going to lean once again, but that's why, you know, our pass yards have gone up per game and so on and so forth, because they're Ryan Fitzpatrick is having to throw the ball. Anyway, so we'll see how that all plays out. It is going to be an interesting game in that way. Let's look at the statistics from our previous games. Obviously, we had a really good game against the Eagles, and they had a pretty terrible game against the Bengals. We had 409 total yards. They had 271. We had 351 passing yards. They had 209. We had 58 rushing yards to their 62. We had 6.5 yards per play. They were at 3.9. No fumbles from either team, but we did throw 1 interception. We're both 41% on third downs in our previous game. We had the ball for 31-18. They had it for 28-19. We had 7 penalties. They had 10. Those are accepted penalties, though, remember. Ryan Fitzpatrick was 27-39 for 69.2% completion percentage, 365 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 113.7 passer rating. On the season, he's 62.8% completion percentage, 2,266 yards, 13 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and an 82.8 passer rating. I threw this in there just because Matt Hawk was 1 for 100%, 1 yard, 1 touchdown, and 158.3 passer rating. Obviously, because there was that trick play that, you know, helped us take the lead at one point. So it was fun for sure. And again, credit to the coaching staff. Again, in that one game, there was more positive credit to the coaching staff. On the season, there's far more negative credit to the coaching staff than those handful of positives entail. So let's see. Sam Darnold was 28 for 48, 58.3%, 239 yards, and a 71.4 passer rating. No touchdowns, no interceptions. On the season, he's 63% on his completion percentage, 2,154 yards, 13 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and an 80.4 passer rating. So him and Ryan Fitzpatrick are actually pretty close overall, as you can see on their overall stat lines. Let's see, Albert Wilson led the way for us last week in rushing. 2 rushes, 31 yards, and a 15.5 average. Myles Gaskin, 2 rushes, 20 yards, and a 10 average. Patrick Laird, 10 rushes, 5 yards, 1 touchdown, and a .5 average. Let's see. Le'Veon Bell led the way, 10 rushes, 32 yards, and a 3.2 average. Bilal Powell, 4 rushes, 14 yards, and a 3.5 average. But obviously Le'Veon Bell is going to be out. Receiving, Devontae Parker led the way, 7 of 10, 159 yards, 2 touchdowns. His first truly dominant game that he's had his entire career, but certainly on pace for a career best season. I mean, he's already exceeded his season highs in touchdowns and yardage. He's, I believe, 4 passes away from tying his season best in catches. So he's obviously having his, but again, that's mostly because he's finally healthy. Mike Gesicki's 5 of 7, 79 yards and a touchdown. He's having his best season, but it's only his second season. And most of his development, and again, he was a Gase pick, and so far, half of his development came from the Gase regime, but his ability to be an effective blocker came from that regime. So credit where credit is due, but this coaching staff is helping him to further his development. So credit where credit's due. Patrick Laird's 4 of 5, 43 yards. Allen Hurns 3 of 4, 33 yards. Albert Wilson 5 of 5, 32 yards. Durham Smythe 2 of 3, 13. Robbie Anderson led the way for the Jets, 7 of 10, 101 yards. Le'Veon Bell 4 of 5, 35 yards. Ryan Griffin 5 of 7, 30. Demaryius Thomas 3 of 5 for 23. Vincent Smith 2 of 3 for 23 yards. Defensively, we had 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and 5 passes defense. The Jets had 1 sack, 3 tackles for loss, and 3 passes defense. So obviously they struggled immensely across the board in their previous game. And so, like I said, I mean, it's going to be an interesting game. I think it'll be pretty evenly matched overall. I do think it's probably going to be a bit of a low-scoring game. I don't know, man. I mean, it's super hard to predict who's going to win. I mean, there are so many factors that could be the deciding factor. We'll have to wait and see how the officiating is. There's so much, so it's really hard. The only real predictions are, I think it might be a bit more of a low-scoring game. But, we'll have to see. But as far as the 4 things, right? So again, for me, the biggest things that I'm looking for in each of these games going forward, and I have been since, halfway through the season, is first and foremost, are we able to win games? Because that's the most important thing to me. I think we definitely do stand a chance. I think we stand a pretty damn decent chance. And certainly I hope for us to win this game. I'm rooting for us to win this game. I don't care what happens to our draft positioning. That is not even a consideration to me. So I want this win. I think we can win. I definitely think we stand a good chance to win. Are we going to win? Well, we have to wait until tomorrow to find out. Are we competitive? Look, again, I mean, the full context is that, yes, we have been playing, a lot of bad teams. The strength of schedule has been getting weaker and weaker and weaker as the season goes on. Teams like the Jets have been massively injured, right? So there are a lot of factors that go into that. But the players are certainly giving it everything that they have, right? Despite the fact that the coaching staff has shown a lot of things to suggest that they are So yeah, anyway, are we going to be competitive? I definitely think that there is a chance for that. I think that these players are going to certainly go out and give it their all. It's, you know, still undetermined what kind of game the coaching staff is going to play and what kind of game they're going to call, you know, how they're going to do things with their inactives and so on and so forth, especially now that everybody's healthy, right? Who do they choose to inactivate or put on the inactives list, right? Do they throw somebody on there that just doesn't make sense, right? Like they've done with Shaq Calhoun multiple times, right? So we'll see, right? A lot of this really is we'll see. But I do think that the players are going to go out and give it all. And I think that they certainly could make this a competitive game. We certainly have seen more of that the past few games than the first half of the season. Injuries, well, you know, we're relatively healthy right now, but we do have some key guys. So, you know, I guess really the big thing is obviously watch injuries overall. How do we come out of this game with injuries? I mean, you know, even last week the trend was down, right? Because Kalen Ballage goes on injured reserve and Jerome Baker had to come out of the game. But for me, I'm going to be really looking at some of those key players, right? So Ryan Fitzpatrick and Jerome Baker, Nick Needham, right? Guys like that, right? I mean, all the guys really that are on the injury report are key guys. Alan Hearns, Julian Davenport for this team as it stands right now and as it's built right now. And then finally, bright spots, right? So last week in the game against the Eagles, there were a bunch of bright spots, right? But for the season as a whole, there really aren't that many. There's a handful of them, maybe at best, and the vast majority of them are, you know, just average at best, right? So the only one that, you know, sticks out as above average is obviously Devontae Parker, and that's really it. Even Preston Williams, he was only doing all right. Obviously, he had a lot of drops. He is a rookie, so on and so forth, so that has something to do with it. But he was having just an okay season, and now he's injured, right, with an ACL tear, so that's huge. Mark Walton obviously got kicked off the team, blah, 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 blah. So, on the season, there really aren't that many bright spots. We'll evaluate that at the end of the season, you know, once it's all said and done. But overall, there really haven't been many. And again, there's been so much roster turnover that even potential bright spots or guys that maybe could be carryovers are being kicked off the team for other unknown guys that likely won't be here next year either. So, yeah, so that's that. That's all I got for you guys. That is my preview video for tomorrow's game. Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, it's super simple, you know, those four things. That's how it's going to be for the rest of the season. Once the season ends, once we know like where our draft positioning is and so on, then we can start talking about that a little bit more. But for now, it's just those 4 points. And look, I am excited for this game. I'm always excited for Dolphins football, even if, you know, I do expect it to be shitty like I have most of the year. Because I always just love to watch the Dolphins play, regardless of whether or not I like the direction the team is going in, and these players have given me a reason to be excited for the game as well. And we certainly could come away with the win, and I hope we do. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts for my videos. Make sure you share my channel and my videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.